My stepmom humiliated me in public and tried to separate me from my brother who raised me. But when I left home, my dad had to choose between her and me, and what happened next left everyone speechless. I'm 17 years old. I'm in my senior year of high school, and honestly, I don't even know where to start with all of this. I guess I should begin by saying that my mom died when I was 10, from cancer, and those 2 years watching her slowly fade away were the worst of my life. My dad was like 38 at the time. My brother Dylan was 15, and I was just a kid who didn't understand why his mom couldn't get out of bed anymore. After she died, Dylan basically became my second mom. You know, he helped me with homework, took me to play basketball, made sure I ate something decent when Dad worked late at his law firm. My dad did what he could, honestly, but he was destroyed and worked a ton. I think it was his way of dealing with everything. For like 6 years, it was just the three of us. And even though I missed my mom terribly, we had found our rhythm. Dylan graduated from college and got a job in marketing. Moved to an apartment not too far from us, but he came over for dinner like 3 times a week. On weekends, we'd go to the movies or play video games until 3 in the morning. My dad relaxed quite a bit after those first hard years. Like, he trusted me. He knew Dylan was looking after me, and things were good. Not perfect. Obviously, they were never going to be perfect without Mom, but good, until like a year and a half ago when everything went to shit. Sorry for the language, but there's no other way to say it. My dad met Rebecca at work. She was a legal assistant at his firm. She was 40 years old and had a 6-year-old daughter named Molly, or, well, technically her name is Zoe, but everyone calls her Molly. I don't know why. At first, I thought it was fine that Dad had someone, you know? He'd been alone for so long, and I just wanted him to be happy. They dated for like 4 months, and everything was normal. Occasional dinners. I met her a couple times, and she seemed nice. But then, literally out of nowhere, Dad announced they were getting married. 6 months after meeting each other. 6 months. Dylan and I were like, what? But Dad was so excited, and we didn't want to ruin it, so we said we were happy for him, even though inside we thought it was too fast. They got married in a small ceremony, basically a courthouse thing, and Rebecca and Molly moved into our house. Our house, the house where I grew up, where I could still smell Mom's perfume in some rooms if I closed my eyes, where every corner had memories of her. And suddenly there was another woman living there, reorganizing everything, changing the curtains that Mom had picked out, putting her photos everywhere. I tried to be mature about it. I really did. I was 16 at the time, and I told myself this was part of moving on, that Mom would have wanted Dad to be happy. The first 2 months were weird, but tolerable. Molly was quiet, spent most of her time in her room, and when she came out, she was nice to me. Rebecca cooked family dinners every night, which was different because Dad and I usually ate pizza or whatever was easy. She insisted we eat together at the dining room table, no phones, making conversation. It wasn't horrible, just awkward, like forced. Dylan kept coming over, but less and less. I think he also felt weird about the whole new situation. And then Rebecca started changing things. First, it was small rules, like, you have to let us know if you're going to be home after 9, or you have to clean your room before the weekend. Reasonable stuff, I guess, even though Dad had never been that strict. But then she started getting involved with my relationship with Dylan, and that's where things got ugly. She started making comments like, you're too old to depend so much on your brother, or you need to make more friends your own age instead of spending all your time with Dylan. At first, Dad wouldn't say anything. He'd just stand there quiet while she talked, and that hurt more than her comments. One day, Dylan invited me to stay at his apartment for the weekend. Something we'd done like 1,000 times before, and Rebecca said no. Just like that. She said no because apparently I had to spend quality time with the family, meaning with her and Molly. I told Dad to please let me go. That Dylan and I had plans for weeks, and he just said Rebecca was right, that we needed time to bond as a new family. Bond, as if you could force that kind of thing. Dylan got mad when I told him. Said he was going to talk to Dad, but I asked him not to because I didn't want to cause more problems. Things kept getting worse. Rebecca started complaining that Dylan came over too much, that he interrupted our family dinners, that I needed space to adapt to my new family. My new family. As if Dylan wasn't my family, as if it hadn't been him who held me when I cried for Mom, who taught me to drive, who went to every one of my basketball games when Dad couldn't because of work. Rebecca acted like Dylan was just some random acquaintance, and not my brother who basically raised me. Labor Day, like 4 months ago, was when everything exploded. Rebecca organized this huge barbecue in the backyard, invited a bunch of people from her work and some neighbors. Dylan came because it was Labor Day and we always spent those days together. It was like a family tradition. It was ridiculously hot, like 95 degrees, and Dylan and I decided to get in the pool to cool off. We were playing, splashing water, messing around, laughing. We were just having fun. And honestly, it was the first time in months that I felt genuinely happy in that house. Rebecca came out of the kitchen and saw us in the pool, and the look on her face, I can't even describe it. She was furious. She walked up to the edge of the pool and started yelling at us in front of all the guests, saying we were irresponsible, that this was an event for adults, that we were acting like children, that we were disrespecting her. Dylan tried to explain that we were just cooling off, that we weren't bothering anyone, but she kept yelling. She told me to get out of the water immediately and go to my room, like I was a 5-year-old. All the guests went quiet, staring, and I'd never felt so humiliated in my life. Dylan got out of the water and told Rebecca she was out of line, that she had no right to talk to me like that. She told him that in her house she made the rules, and that was like a stab to the heart because that wasn't her house. It was my house, the house where I grew up, where my mom lived. Dad finally stepped in, but only to tell me to apologize to Rebecca and go inside. Me, not her for making a ridiculous scene. Not her for yelling at me like crazy in front of everyone. Me for daring to swim in my own pool on a 95-degree day. I said I wasn't going to apologize because I hadn't done anything wrong. And Dad grabbed me by the arm and took me inside, almost dragging me. In my room, he told me he was disappointed in me. That Rebecca was trying to make our house a home and I wasn't. Cooperating. That I needed to grow up and accept that things had changed. I asked him why he didn't defend me. Why he let her humiliate me like that. And he just said I had been disrespectful and needed to apologize. I told him I wasn't going to do it, that I hadn't done anything wrong, and he walked out of the room, slamming the door. I stayed there lying on my bed, listening to the barbecue continue outside like nothing had happened, and I cried for the first time in years. I cried for Mom, because she never would have let anyone treat me like that. I cried because my dad chose Rebecca over me. I cried because my house no longer felt like my house. Dylan knocked on the door like an hour later and came in, sat on my bed and just hugged me. He didn't say anything, just hugged me. And that was enough. He told me I could come stay with him whenever I wanted, that his door was always open. That night, after all the guests left, Rebecca sent Dylan a text message. I didn't see it at the time, but Dylan showed it to me later. The message said something like he was a bad influence on me, that he was interfering with my adaptation to the new family dynamic, that he needed to take a step back and let them raise me properly. She said it all in a super passive-aggressive tone, but pretending to be nice. Like, I hope you understand this is what's best for Caleb. He needs consistent parental figures, blah, blah, blah. Dylan was furious, but also hurt. You could see it on his face when he showed me the message. After that, Dylan started coming over less. Not because he wanted to, but because Rebecca made everything impossible. If he came for dinner, she'd find some reason to send him home early. If I wanted to go to his apartment, she'd say I had to stay to do homework or help with something around the house. Dad backed every one of her decisions without even asking my opinion. It was like suddenly Dylan was the enemy, when he'd never been anything but amazing to me. Rebecca implemented a bunch of new rules that were clearly aimed at me. Curfew at 8 p.m. on school nights, 10 p.m. on weekends. I had to turn in my phone every night so she could check my messages. I couldn't close my bedroom door. I had to ask permission for anything, even to eat a snack. It was ridiculous. I was 17 years old and she treated me like I was a troubled kid when I'd never gotten in trouble in my life. I got good grades, didn't drink or smoke, hadn't done anything to deserve that level of control. One day, I got home early from school because they canceled the last 2 periods for a teacher meeting, and I heard Rebecca talking on the phone in the kitchen. She was talking to her mom, I think, and she was saying things like, I was a problem, that she was considering suggesting to Dad that he send me to live with my grandparents for a while. that I needed discipline she couldn't give me because I didn't respect her. She said Dylan had spoiled me, and now I was incapable of following basic rules. I heard her laugh and say something like, "These teenagers think they can do whatever they want." I stood there in the hallway listening to all that and felt something break inside me. It wasn't just anger or frustration anymore, it was like a deep sadness mixed with rage. This woman wanted to kick me out of my own house, the house where I grew up, where every room had memories of my mom. She wanted to send me to my grandparents who lived 3 hours away so she could have Dad all to herself. And the worst part is, I knew Dad would probably consider it if she asked him to, because he hadn't defended me even once since she arrived. I went up to my room quietly, pulled out my big backpack, and started packing. Clothes, my laptop, chargers, some photos of Mom, my headphones, the essentials. I didn't take much because I didn't want it to sound like I was running away, though I guess technically that's what I was doing. I sent Dylan a text that said, "I'm coming over. I'll explain when I get there." I looked out the window. Rebecca was still in the kitchen, so I went down the stairs as quietly as possible and left through the back door. I walked the 4 blocks to the bus stop and got on the one going toward Dylan's apartment. The whole way, I couldn't stop thinking I was making a mistake, that I should go back and talk to Dad. But then I remembered how Rebecca had treated me, how Dad never defended me, and I knew I couldn't stay there one more day. When I got to Dylan's apartment, he opened the door before I could knock. I think he saw me from the window. He saw my face and just said, "What happened?" And I started crying again. I told him everything. What I heard, how I felt, everything. Dylan told me I could stay as long as I needed, that we were going to figure this out together. I set up in his guest room, which was basically his office with a sofa bed, but it was perfect. It was quiet and peaceful, and there was nobody yelling at me or telling me what to do. That night we ate pizza and watched movies, and for the first time in months I felt like myself again. Dad started calling me around 7. I didn't answer. He kept calling, sent like 20 messages asking where I was, if I was okay, to please answer. Finally, I sent him a message that said, "I'm fine. I'm with Dylan. I'm not coming back." He went crazy. Started calling Dylan. Threatened to call the police. Said I was a minor and had to come home. Dylan talked to him and calmly explained that I was safe, that I wasn't in danger, that I just needed space after everything that had happened. Dad demanded to talk to me, but I didn't want to. So Dylan told him he'd give me time and we could talk when I was ready. The next few days were weird. I went to school normally, came back to Dylan's apartment, did homework, we ate dinner together. It was a simple routine, but it made me feel at peace. Dad kept sending messages every day, apologizing, saying we needed to talk, that he missed me. Part of me, I wanted to respond, but another part was still too angry. Dylan, let me process everything at my own pace, never pressured me to talk to Dad or to go back home. Like a week later, Molly sent me a message. We'd never been close, but we didn't have problems either. She'd always been nice to me. She told me things at home were tense, that Dad and Rebecca fought all the time, that she heard Dad tell Rebecca she'd gone too far with me. She said Rebecca was considering leaving, that she was tired of Dad blaming her for everything. Honestly, I didn't know how to feel about it. Like, should I feel guilty? Should I be happy? I was confused. I finally agreed to meet Dad at the park near our house, the same park where Mom used to take me when I was little. It was weird seeing him there. He looked tired and older than I remembered. He sat on the bench next to me, and for like 5 minutes neither of us said anything. Finally, he started talking, told me he was sorry, that he hadn't realized how much everything was affecting me, that he'd been so focused on making his marriage work that he didn't pay attention to me. He said, Rebecca acknowledged she'd been too hard on me, that she was also coming from a difficult divorce and was trying to prove she could be a good mother figure, but had done everything wrong. I told him I didn't need another mom, that I had a mom and nobody was going to replace her. I told him Rebecca never gave me a chance to get to know her before she started imposing rules and pushing Dylan away. I told him it felt like he'd chosen his new family over me, and that was what hurt the most. Dad started crying, which was shocking because Dad never cried, and he said it had never been his intention to make me feel that way, that I was always his priority, and he'd been an idiot not to see it before. He asked me what I needed from him, and I honestly told him I needed space, that I wasn't ready to come home yet, that I needed him to set clear boundaries with Rebecca about how she treated me. I told him Dylan wasn't the problem, that he'd been more of a father to me than anyone in the last year, and that if Rebecca couldn't accept that, then I didn't know how we were going to work as a family. Dad nodded to everything, said he was going to talk to Rebecca, that they were going to go to couples therapy, that he wanted to fix things. Like 2 weeks after that conversation, Molly called me crying. She said Rebecca and Dad had a horrible fight, that Rebecca packed her things and left to her mom's house. She said Rebecca told him he had to choose between her and me, that she couldn't stay in a marriage where she felt like the husband always took his son's side over hers. Dad apparently told her I was his son and I would always be his priority, that if she couldn't understand that, then maybe they weren't meant to be together. Molly was devastated. Obviously, it was her mom, and her life was also falling apart. I felt horrible for Molly, honestly. She hadn't done anything wrong and was paying for her mom's mistakes. I told her I was sorry, that I hadn't wanted to cause this, but she told me it wasn't my fault, that she knew her mom had been unfair to me. She said her mom had control issues forever, that's why her biological dad had divorced her. That surprised me because Rebecca always acted like she was the victim in that situation. I went to visit Dad like 2 days later. The house felt empty without Rebecca and Molly there. Dad made dinner, pasta with tomato sauce. Nothing fancy, but it was what we always did before Rebecca came along. We ate at the kitchen table, not in the formal dining room, and just talked about normal things, like school, Dylan's work, basketball. It was nice, peaceful. After dinner, Dad showed me Molly's room, which was now empty. He said Rebecca had taken everything, that she'd made it clear she wasn't planning to come back. I asked him how he felt about it, and he sighed, and said sad, but also relieved. He said he'd realized he'd married Rebecca for the wrong reasons, that he was lonely and scared of being alone forever after losing Mom, but that wasn't fair to Rebecca or to us. He said he'd tried to force something that was never going to work because their visions of what a family should be were completely different. He asked me if I'd consider coming back home, but I honestly told him I wasn't ready yet. I told him being with Dylan had given me space to think and process everything, and that I needed a little more time. He said he understood, that when I was ready, the doors would always be open. He asked if we could at least have dinner together once or twice a week, just the two of us or with Dylan too. I told him yes, that I'd like that. It's been like 2 months since Rebecca left. The divorce is in process. Dad says it's going to be quick because they were married less than 2 years and don't have kids together. Molly and I text sometimes. She's living with her mom and grandma. Now, she says her mom is in therapy, which I hope helps her. I also started going to therapy. My dad offered it, and I accepted because, honestly, I have a lot of things to process. Not just about Rebecca, but about Mom and about everything. I'm still living with Dylan, but I go to Dad's house like 3 times a week now. Things are slowly improving between us. He's making a real effort to listen to me and to be present, not just physically, but emotionally. He asks me how I'm feeling, what I need, what can I do to help you. They're simple questions, but they mean a lot. Last week, Dad apologized to me again. We were sitting on the couch watching a basketball game, and suddenly he paused the TV and said, "Caleb, I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just about Rebecca, but for not listening to you, for not defending you, for making you feel like you weren't my priority. You're my son, and I love you more than anything in the world, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the time we lost." I told him I knew, that I loved him too, and that I just needed time. I don't know when I'm going to move back with Dad permanently. Maybe when I graduate high school in a few months, or maybe later. Dylan says there's no rush, that I can stay as long as I need. Dad also says there's no pressure, that he understands. I think we're all learning to be family again, but in a different way now, more honest. It's weird because part of me misses how things were before Rebecca, when it was just Dad, Dylan, and me finding our way after losing Mom. But I also know we can't go back. We can only move forward. The truth is, I'm still processing everything. I still get angry when I think about how Rebecca treated me and how Dad allowed it. It still hurts to think about the months I lost with my dad because she was in the middle. But I'm also learning that people make mistakes. that pain makes people do stupid things, and that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting but deciding to move forward, despite what happened. Last night, Dylan and I were cooking dinner, and he asked me how I felt about everything. I told him honestly I didn't know, that some days I was fine and other days I was still angry. He told me that was normal, that there was no right way to feel after something like this. I thanked him for everything, for giving me a place to stay, for never pressuring me, for just being there. He told me I didn't have to thank him. That's what brothers do, and that simple phrase made me realize how lucky I am to have him. I think in the end, I'm going to be okay. I don't know what the future will look like, if Dad's going to remarry someday, if I'm ever going to be able to trust him completely again, if I'll ever feel like that house is really my home again. But for now, I'm taking things day by day, focusing on finishing high school, on rebuilding my relationship with Dad, and on not losing what I have with Dylan. Because at the end of the day, what matters isn't the house you live in or who's living there, but the people who make you feel safe and loved. And even though I lost that for a while, I'm starting to find it again, just in a different way than it was before.